Emma took a deep breath as she stepped out of the car, the cold air of the Rocky Mountains penetrating her lungs. The landscape around her was breathtaking, with snow-covered trees and majestic mountains rising in the background. However, despite the beauty, her heart was heavy. She had come to the ski resort looking for an escape, a way to distance herself from the pain of a recent betrayal. The memory of her ex-boyfriend's disappointed look still haunted her, and every step she took seemed to echo her insecurity. "This is where I'm going to rediscover my passion for life," she murmured to herself, trying to convince herself that this trip would be a fresh start. As she approached the resort entrance, she saw a group of skiers laughing and having fun. They were the image of happiness, but Emma felt like an outsider, a shadow among those who seemed so free and carefree. As she prepared to rent her equipment, Emma caught herself looking at her reflection in a nearby mirror. Her eyes, usually bright and curious, now looked tired. "I can do this," she said in a firm tone, as if trying to encourage herself. "Life is not going to beat me." With a nervous smile, she grabbed her skis and headed toward the slopes. On the other side of the resort, Ben was also arriving, but his motivation was very different. He was a successful executive, used to the pressure and constant challenges of work. The mountains were his way of escaping, of breaking free from the chains that tied him to his stressful daily life. However, he too carried the weight of a betrayal he had committed, which for him was just an act of rebellion against a life that seemed to be falling apart. "Maybe I'll find a new perspective here," he thought as he put on his skis. The idea of a fresh start appealed to him, but part of him was conflicted. He didn't feel guilty. He believed the betrayal had been a way to break free from a relationship that no longer satisfied him. "Sometimes you have to break some rules to find happiness," he muttered to himself as he headed toward the slope. With her skis adjusted, Emma felt the adrenaline rush as she descended the mountain for the first time. She left the pain and insecurity behind, even if only for a few minutes, as the cold wind whipped against her face. However, the fun was interrupted when dark clouds began to form in the sky. A sudden storm seemed to be approaching quickly, and the resort's lively atmosphere began to change. "Hey, did you see that?" shouted a nearby skier as the snow began to fall more intensely. Emma looked up at the sky and realized she would have to return to the resort before the storm got stronger. Just as she decided to head back, a gust of wind disoriented her, and the next thing she knew, she was losing control. Ben, who was further down the slope, saw a figure sliding uncontrollably towards him. "Watch out!" he shouted, but Emma couldn't avoid the collision. Both fell into the snow, laughing nervously as they got up. "Sorry, I didn't mean to run you over," Emma said, looking at Ben, who was watching her with an amused smile. "Don't worry, I've been in worse situations," Ben replied, trying to calm her down. The look in his eyes was welcoming, even though she didn't know at that moment that he too carried his own emotional scars. As the storm intensified, the resort announced that all skiers should take shelter. Emma and Ben found themselves forced to enter a nearby cabin, where the soft light and warmth contrasted with the cold and storm outside. The space was small, and they sat side by side, the tension in the air palpable. They were strangers, but the situation would unite them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The cabin trembled slightly with the wind blowing hard outside, but the atmosphere inside was tense and loaded with unspoken words. Emma and Ben stared at each other, each in their own corner, their expressions closed, as if they were in a silent duel. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the sound of the wind and the snow piling up at the door. "You don't have to look at me like that," Emma said, breaking the silence with a voice that conveyed a mix of anger and insecurity. "If you don't want to talk, that's fine. I can stay quiet." Ben raised an eyebrow, surprised by her reaction. "Look like what?" "I was just trying to understand why we're stuck here in this cabin, as if we were enemies. We don't have to be like this." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you acted like you didn't care," Emma replied, her voice rising. "You're just another person who doesn't realize how people feel." "And you think I don't care?" Ben countered, his frustration beginning to show. "I just didn't expect to meet someone like you here. You seem so closed off. It's like there's a barrier around you." Emma let out a bitter laugh. And you think you can just break through that barrier with a look? You don't know anything about me, Ben. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Maybe not, but I also don't know anything about you. And to be honest, I don't know if I want to know. You don't seem willing to open up. The tension in the air was palpable, but as the minutes passed, something began to change. The hostile atmosphere between them began to slowly dissipate, like snow melting under the sun. Emma looked away, staring out the fogged window, while Ben watched her, realizing that there was more to her than just a wounded woman. "Why are you here, Emma?" he asked, his voice now softer. "What brought you to this ski resort?" Emma hesitated, but the sincerity in Ben's voice made her relax a little. "I needed some time for myself. I recently went through a betrayal, and I needed to escape. I didn't want to stay home, stuck in memories. I wanted to rediscover what it means to live." "Betrayal," Ben repeated, almost to himself. He felt a pang in his chest. "I understand. I also made mistakes. Mistakes that cost me a lot." "Mistakes? You talk about betrayal like it's something trivial," Emma replied, her defensiveness becoming a little softer. "Betrayal hurts. It's not just a mistake. It's a choice someone makes, no matter what they say." "You're right," Ben said, looking into her eyes. "And I made that choice. But it wasn't an easy choice. I was lost. Not that it justifies anything, but I was looking for something I didn't know what it was, something I never found." Emma watched him, and for the first time, she saw a man who was not just a stranger, but someone who also carried burdens. "And what did you find here in this cabin? Stuck with me?" she asked, her tone now more curious than accusatory. "Maybe I found someone who makes me want to be better," Ben replied, his gaze sincere. "Someone who, even in the midst of so much pain, still fights. And do you really think someone like me can help with that?" Emma was surprised by her own vulnerability, but the connection that was forming was undeniable. "Maybe not, but I want to try," he replied, the sound of his voice echoing like a promise. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer a silence of hostility, but a space for reflection. Emma felt her heart race, realizing that, despite everything, there was something there that attracted her. It was the challenge of understanding not only Ben's pain, but also her own. The wind howled outside, hitting the cabin hard as the storm intensified. Inside that small space, the atmosphere was one of unexpected warmth that contrasted with the icy cold spreading through the Rocky Mountains. Emma and Ben were sitting on opposite sides of a small wooden bench, but the distance between them was beginning to dissolve as the conversation became deeper. "I always thought validation came from work, you know," Ben began, breaking the silence. His voice was deep, but there was a vulnerability Emma hadn't noticed before. "When I cheated, it wasn't just because of the other person. It was because I wanted to feel alive again, as if I was proving to myself that I was still wanted." Emma looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the lantern. "Didn't you feel that was wrong?" Her question was direct, but there was no judgment in her voice. It was just curiosity. "It was, but I was so lost," Ben replied, his gaze fixed on the fogged window. "I thought I was looking for something I had lost, but in reality, I was just sinking deeper. The betrayal didn't give me the freedom I was seeking. It only brought more pain." Emma felt a pang in her heart. "I understand more than you think. I went through something similar. The betrayal I suffered made me question everything about myself." She hesitated for a moment, remembering the still, fresh wound. That feeling of not being good enough, it's like a shadow that never goes away. Ben turned to her, his eyes intense and full of empathy. "You are good enough, Emma. No one should make you feel less than that." He moved a little closer, as if the physical distance between them reflected their emotional barriers. "The truth is, we all have our weaknesses. It's painful, but it's what makes us human." Emma smiled faintly, feeling touched by his sincerity. "Sometimes, I wonder if I can really get over this, if I'll ever be able to open my heart again." She let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. "And what if I just end up getting hurt again?" "You might get hurt, but you might also find something amazing," Ben said, his voice full of hope. "Love is risky, but it's worth it. Life is about taking risks, isn't it?" The cabin was enveloped in a comfortable silence, the sound of the storm outside almost becoming a musical background to the intimate conversation that was unfolding. Emma felt a wave of warmth pass through her, not just because of the weather, but because of the connection that was forming between them. "I didn't know I could feel this way with someone I just met," she confessed, the sincerity in her words echoing in the air. "Neither did I," Ben replied, his gaze fixed on Emma. "But there's something about you that makes me want to open up. It's like we're connected in a way I never expected." Emma felt her heart race. It was as if an invisible thread connected them, linking their souls in a mutual understanding. The laughter they shared and the stories they exchanged began to break down the barriers each had built over time. As the night wore on, the lantern's light began to dim, casting dancing shadows around the cabin. Emma and Ben found themselves getting closer and closer to each other, the intensity of the conversation now turning into palpable tension. Listening to the wind increasing outside, Emma realized that the outside world was disappearing, and all that mattered was that moment. Then, without thinking, she leaned a little closer to Ben, feeling the electricity in the air. "Do you really think we can get over this?" Emma asked, her eyes fixed on his, seeking an answer that would echo in her heart. "I want to believe so," Ben whispered, and at that moment, the remaining distance between them was eliminated all at once. The look they exchanged was full of promises, and before they could think, their lips met in a soft yet intense kiss. It was an unexpected moment that seemed to encapsulate all the hopes and fears they had shared. Both were surprised by the strength of the attraction, but in that instant, the outside world seemed irrelevant. The storm still raged, but inside the cabin, a new warmth was beginning to blossom. The soft morning light filtered through the small windows of the cabin, illuminating the space and revealing the marks of the previous night. Emma woke up with a mix of emotions. The kiss she had shared with Ben still burned on her lips, but confusion dominated her. "What does this mean?" she thought as she stretched, trying to push away the memories of what had happened. When she looked to the side, she saw Ben still sleeping, his serene expression contrasting with the storm of feelings that stirred her heart. Ben, in turn, woke up with an involuntary smile, remembering the moment when his lips touched Emma's. That intense sensation made him believe that maybe, just maybe, there could be a chance for redemption in his life. "I can't let this slip away," he thought as he sat on the edge of the makeshift bed. He watched Emma, lost in her own thoughts, and felt an urge to approach her. "Emma?" he called softly, as if trying not to break the magic of the moment. Emma looked at him, her heart racing at the sound of her name. "Hi, Ben," she replied with a shy smile that couldn't hide the confusion in her eyes. "About last night, what do you think this means for us?" Ben hesitated for a moment. I don't know, but I feel like there's something special between us, something worth exploring." He stood up and walked over to her, being careful not to invade her personal space. "I know we have our pasts and they're complicated, but maybe this whole situation can be an opportunity for us to start over?" Emma pondered his words. She wanted to believe in his sincerity, but the shadow of betrayal still hung over her memories. "Ben, I'm confused. I was betrayed before, and that left deep scars on me. I don't know if I'm ready to open up again," she confessed, looking at the floor as if the wooden planks could offer some consolation. "I understand," Ben said, his tone now more serious. "And I don't want to rush anything, but I also can't deny what I feel. You make me feel alive again, and that's something I thought I had lost forever." He moved a little closer, searching her eyes. "We're stuck here, but this doesn't have to be just a prison. It can be an opportunity." Emma lifted her gaze, staring at him. There was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, but also a caution that couldn't be ignored. "And if this ends badly? If you end up hurting me?" she questioned, her voice trembling. Ben took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was at stake. "I don't want to hurt you. What I did in the past was a mistake, and I'm trying to learn from it. You're not a reward for me to feel better, Emma. You are. You are important to me." He paused, pondering the words he would choose next. "Everyone makes mistakes, and I'm one of them. But that doesn't mean I can't change." The storm outside the cabin raged, but inside, a new storm of emotions was brewing. Emma felt the need to protect herself, but at the same time, there was a part of her that wanted to take the risk. And if the past comes back to haunt us? She dared to ask. Ben looked away for a moment, visibly affected by the question. I can't promise that the past won't come back, but I can promise that I'll fight to make sure it doesn't happen. I want you to know that I'm here, willing to face anything by your side. Hearing his words, Emma felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Despite the latent fear, there was something there that made her want to believe. Okay, let's see where this goes, she decided, her voice a little firmer now. The two spent the rest of the morning talking, sharing dreams and hopes. Emma spoke about her passion for photography and how she dreamed of capturing the world's beauty. Ben, on the other hand, revealed his desire to escape the oppressive routine of his job and explore new possibilities. The connection between them deepened with each word exchanged, as if they were drawing a map for an uncertain but promising future. However, as the storm continued to rage outside, a shadow from Ben's past began to form, a message on his phone that he couldn't ignore. He felt his heart race, and for a brief moment, the sparkle in his eyes faded. Emma, noticing the change in his expression, also felt a chill in her stomach. The instability of everything they were beginning to build seemed more real than ever. The cabin swayed subtly with the strong wind blowing outside, but the real storm was inside Ben's heart. He looked at the phone screen, the message from his ex-girlfriend still glowing like a beacon illuminating his past mistakes. Emma, sitting across from him, noticed the change in his demeanor. Ben's eyes, which had previously reflected a glimmer of hope and connection, were now filled with shadows and uncertainties. Ben, what happened? You're different. Emma's voice was soft, but there was a firmness that didn't go unnoticed. She leaned a little closer, trying to decipher the secrets he wasn't willing to share. It's just the storm, he began, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed that there was something deeper troubling him. Emma frowned, determined not to let him hide behind half-truths. No, it's not just the storm. I can tell something is bothering you. Please, tell me. Her insistence was almost palpable, and the vulnerability in her gaze made Ben feel even more torn. He took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage to expose his wounds. It's the message from my ex-girlfriend, he finally confessed, his voice almost a whisper. She wants to talk about what happened between us. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the air around them had become dense and difficult to breathe. Emma felt a chill in her stomach. And what does that mean for us? The question left her lips like a challenge, and Ben, realizing the gravity of the situation, hesitated once again. I don't know. What we have, it's so new, so different, but I can't just ignore what I left behind. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that reflected his inner conflict. Emma watched every movement, every expression, and her heart tightened. So you're still stuck in your past? Emma stood up, indignation beginning to take over. Ben, I shared my fears and insecurities with you. I thought we were starting something real. The pain in her voice was evident, and Ben felt a knot form in his throat. Emma, it's not that. I'm trying. I'm here with you, and this is real to me. He stood up as well, the proximity between them now loaded with tension. But I can't deny that what I did was wrong, and the consequences of that are still here in my life. So what are you going to do? Go back to her? To your past? Emma crossed her arms, trying to protect herself from the emotional storm that was forming between them. No, that's not how I feel. The frustration took hold of Ben. I just don't know how to deal with this. I want to be here, but at the same time, I can't ignore what happened. Emma felt a wave of sadness and confusion wash over her. I need some time to think, she said, her voice lower now, almost a lament. But just as she turned to leave, a strong wind blew, making the cabin windows rattle. The storm outside intensified, and a sense of urgency filled the space. Emma, wait, Ben called, but she was already a few steps from the door. The force of the wind made the cabin creak, and the door slammed shut with a bang, forcing her to step back. They found themselves close again, the atmosphere charged with unspoken emotions. It seems the storm isn't willing to let us go, Ben joked, trying to break the tension, but the lightness in his voice didn't convince Emma. She looked into his eyes, searching for answers he didn't yet have. Sometimes the external storms reflect the internal ones, don't they? Emma said, her voice now soft but firm. I don't know if I can handle another storm in my life. I don't want to be another problem for you, Emma, but I also don't want to lose what we're building. The sincerity in Ben's words hit Emma like a bolt of lightning, and she found herself at an emotional crossroads, torn between pain and hope that emerged simultaneously. There, under the pressure of the storm, they were closer than ever, but at the same time, the emotional distance that was forming was palpable. Emma took a deep breath, feeling she needed to make a choice, but the fear of getting hurt again paralyzed her. The cabin, now a temporary refuge, had become a battlefield for their hearts. The storm finally began to dissipate, and the faint sunlight filtered through the fogged windows of the cabin. Emma and Ben were sitting on opposite sides of the small room, the silence between them heavy and loaded with unspoken emotions. Ben, with his gaze lost in the white landscape that stretched beyond the door, tried to find the right words to beg for a second chance. Emma, in turn, felt a mix of confusion and pain, struggling against the urge to believe in Ben's promises. "Emma, I'm sorry," Ben began, his voice choked with emotion. "I know I messed up, and I know that doesn't erase what I did, but what we're experiencing here now is real. You're real." Emma looked at him, a storm of emotions crossing her face. "Ben, you can't just expect me to forget what happened. You told me your ex is willing to confront you. How can I trust someone who carries that weight?" The resentment in her voice was palpable, and Ben felt his heart tighten. "I'm not the same person who cheated. I want to change. I want to be someone better, and you make me want that," he said, the sincerity in his eyes almost making Emma falter. But the shadows of the past were deep and hard to ignore. The cabin door opened abruptly, and a familiar figure entered, panting and with a face reddened by the cold. It was Ben's ex-girlfriend. Emma felt her heart race, a chill down her spine. The woman looked around, her eyes fixing on Ben first, then on Emma, and an expression of surprise mixed with resentment took over her face. "Ben, what are you doing here with her?" The ex-girlfriend's voice was loud, almost a scream, and Emma felt the tension in the air intensify. Ben stood up, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Calm down, please. It's not what you think." "It's not? You ran away from me to be here, in a ski cabin with a stranger? What did you expect me to think?" Ben's ex-girlfriend was visibly agitated, and Emma felt a growing anger, not just at the situation, but also at the man who was between them. "I'm not running away. I needed time. I needed to see what was happening to me," Ben said, trying to find a way to pacify the situation. But Emma could no longer bear it. "It's not about you, Ben, and it's not about me. You need to be honest with her. You need to face your actions," Emma said, her voice firm and determined. "I'm not a piece in your game. I deserve more than this." Ben's ex-girlfriend turned to Emma, confused. "You don't understand. He cheated on me, and now he's here with you, trying to redeem himself. He can't just jump from one relationship to another without resolving things first. And you think I'm the solution to his problems?" Emma retorted, feeling the pain of betrayal being reopened. "I'm not a remedy for your guilt, Ben. If you really want to change, you need to face the consequences of what you did, without hiding behind me or anyone else." Ben, now completely cornered, felt the weight of Emma's words fall on him like a cloak of embarrassment. He had never thought that his mistakes would affect not only his life, but also the life of another person. The guilt began to turn into despair. "Emma, I didn't want this to happen," he turned to her, his voice now low and full of emotion. "I just wanted a chance to make up for my mistakes. But now, everything seems lost." Emma looked at him, her eyes bright with held-back tears. "Maybe that's what you need, Ben, to lose to understand what really has value. I can't be your escape or your solution." With one last look at Ben, Emma turned and walked toward the door. The cold mountain air cut her face, but she felt a flame of determination burning inside her. She couldn't be another victim of his choices. Emma was determined to move on, to value herself above all. As she left the cabin, Ben stood still, Emma's words echoing in his mind. He realized that the consequences of his actions were not just a burden to carry, but a chance to truly understand who he was and who he wanted to become. The door closed behind Emma, and he found himself alone, finally confronting what he had done. Reflecting on this experience, ask yourself, How many times have you felt trapped, as if you were facing an endless storm? What have these challenging situations revealed about you? Sometimes, it's in adversity that we find the greatest lessons and the greatest moments of growth. This story is not just about a physical storm, but about the internal challenges we all face and how we can come out of them stronger and wiser. Are you ready to turn your own storms into opportunities for learning and growth? If you liked this reflection, click on the video that's appearing on your screen now. This is, in my opinion, one of the best stories I've ever told. And if you liked what you heard just now, you'll undoubtedly love this other story too. So subscribe to the channel, click on the video on your screen now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.